There is a particular kind of relief that arrives when everyone leaves. Not loneliness, not failure. Relief. The door closes, the conversation ends, the group chat goes quiet. And for a moment, just a moment, you feel something loosen in your chest. Something you had been holding without realizing you were holding it. Most people do not talk about that feeling. It seems like the wrong thing to admit. We are supposed to want connection, want company, want to be seen. And we do want those things. But underneath the wanting, there is sometimes an exhaustion that comes from the sheer effort of being witnessed, of managing how you appear, what you say, what you do not say, what version of yourself you are presenting today. This video is about what lives in that quiet moment after everyone leaves, and why learning to stay in it, rather than immediately filling it with noise, might be one of the most important things you ever do. Let us start with something honest. When you open a social media feed and see someone else's life, the trip they took, the milestone they reached, the body they have, the relationship that looks effortless, something happens inside you that is not quite admiration and not quite hatred. It is something in between, a kind of shrinking, a quiet voice that says, "And what have you done?" Psychologists who study this pattern have found that the more time people spend passively consuming curated images of other people's lives, the worse they tend to feel about their own. Not because their lives are objectively worse, but because the comparison is structurally unfair. You are measuring your interior, your doubts, your mess, your unfinished thoughts, against someone else's exterior. Their highlight reel against your behind-the-scenes footage. Alfred Adler, one of the most perceptive psychologists of the 20th century, spent much of his career studying what he called the inferiority feeling, the sense that we are somehow less than, somehow behind, somehow not enough. Adler did not think this feeling was a flaw. He thought it was almost universal. The problem, in his view, was not feeling it. The problem was what we do with it. Some people use that feeling as fuel. They let it push them toward genuine growth, toward building something real, toward becoming more capable. Others use it as a mirror they cannot stop looking into, comparing, measuring, adjusting, performing, until the performance becomes the whole of who they are. Social media did not invent the inferiority feeling, but it gave it a 24-hour stage. Here is what the comparison loop actually costs you. Every time you measure yourself against someone else's curated image, you are not just feeling bad for a moment. You are reinforcing a particular way of understanding your own worth. You are teaching yourself, slowly and repeatedly, that your value is relative, that it depends on where you rank, how you appear, whether you are ahead or behind. And when your sense of worth becomes that dependent on external reference points, something strange happens to your inner life. It starts to hollow out. You stop asking what you actually want, and start asking what looks like wanting the right things. You stop noticing what genuinely interests you, and start curating interests that signal the right kind of person. You stop making choices, and start making performances. James Allen, writing more than a century ago, described the mind as a garden. Left unattended, it grows whatever seeds happen to fall into it, from the environment, from other people, from habit. Tended deliberately, it can grow something worth having. The metaphor is simple, but the implication is serious. If you are not consciously deciding what to cultivate in your own mind, something else will decide for you. And right now, for many people, that something else is an algorithm designed to keep you comparing. Now here is the part that most conversations about this topic skip. The solution is not to simply log off and feel better. It is not a digital detox weekend, or a motivational reminder to love yourself. Those things can help at the margins. But the deeper issue is not the phone. The phone is just the surface. The deeper issue is that many people have spent so long living inside other people's approval systems that they have genuinely lost track of what they value when no one is watching. Think about that for a moment. If you removed every external signal, every like, every comment, every comparison, every expectation from family or peers or culture, what would you actually want your life to look like? What would matter to you? What would you spend your time on? For a lot of people, that question produces not a clear answer, but a kind of blankness. And that blankness is frightening. So they reach for the phone again, or the next social event, or the next thing to optimize, because movement feels safer than stillness. But the blankness is not emptiness, it is an invitation. Friedrich Nietzsche, in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, explored what it means to genuinely create your own values rather than simply inherit them from the crowd. He was not writing a self-help manual. He was asking a much harder question. What does it take to become the author of your own life, rather than a character in someone else's story? The answer he kept returning to involved solitude, not as punishment or withdrawal, but as a necessary condition for honest self-examination. You cannot hear your own voice clearly when you are constantly surrounded by other voices telling you who to be and what to want. This is not a call to become a hermit. It is a call to take the quiet moments seriously, to resist the reflex to fill every silence with stimulation, to let the discomfort of being alone with yourself become information rather than something to escape. Because the discomfort is telling you something. It is showing you the gap between who you have been performing and who you might actually become. Here is a practical way to think about this. The next time you feel that familiar shrinking, that quiet voice that says you are behind, that someone else has more, that your life is somehow smaller than it should be, do not immediately try to fix the feeling or argue yourself out of it. Instead, get curious about it. Ask, compared to what exactly? Whose standard am I measuring myself against right now? Did I choose that standard, or did it arrive from somewhere outside me and I simply accepted it without noticing? Most of the time, when you trace the comparison back to its source, you find that you have been measuring yourself against a value system you never consciously chose. A version of success that belongs to someone else. A timeline that was handed to you by culture or family or the particular corner of the internet you happen to inhabit. That is not a reason to feel ashamed. It is a reason to get deliberate. Adler believed that the direction of a person's life is shaped by the goals they are moving toward, often goals they are not fully conscious of. When those goals are borrowed from other people's expectations, the movement feels hollow even when it looks successful from the outside. When those goals are genuinely your own, even the struggle has a different quality. It has weight. It has meaning. Solitude, used well, is where you find out which goals are actually yours. Not the solitude of scrolling alone in a dark room. Not the solitude of isolation and rumination. But the solitude of sitting with yourself long enough to hear what you actually think about your life, your choices, your direction, your values. It is uncomfortable at first. The mind resists it. It reaches for distraction, for noise, for the familiar comfort of other people's opinions. But if you stay with it, if you treat the discomfort as a workshop rather than a warning, something begins to clarify. You start to notice what genuinely interests you versus what you have been performing interest in. You start to feel the difference between choices that come from fear of falling behind and choices that come from something more honest. You start to hear your own voice again, underneath all the other voices. That is not a small thing. In a world designed to keep you comparing, choosing to know yourself is a quiet act of courage. You do not need to have it all figured out. You do not need a dramatic reinvention or a sudden clarity about your purpose. You just need to be willing to sit in the silence long enough to let it tell you something true. The relief you feel when the room goes quiet is not weakness. It is not antisocial. It is your inner life asking for a little space to breathe. Give it that space. See what it says. And if this spoke to a part of you that rarely gets heard, stay with that feeling for a moment. You are not broken because you feel deeply. You are only beginning to understand yourself. Subscribe to Inside the Labyrinth for more reflections on the hidden patterns of the human mind.